That's a very, very common pattern and not too difficult to spot, although it's so quick that you really are left with the impression that the medium has all the information and is giving is giving the person in the audience bit after bit, and they're not. He's not. He's saying very little and waiting for the feedback and then throwing back. What you'll see is, far from it being all vague or saying things that apply to just everybody, you'll get very specific details being thrown at you. So I'm seeing a pair of cufflinks with a sort of a red jewel or something, something really quite specific, and normally the person doesn't quite make it fit, but then the medium will keep on pushing and start to turn into something else. Well, it's definitely some jewellery. It's definitely showing me jewellery. And then, of course, they're going to make jewellery fit. Well, yes, it was, I've got some jewellery at home. That's right. He's saying, have a look in your jewellery box because it's something there you've forgotten. And the red cufflinks have been forgotten. So keeping track of, well, what was the medium pushing for at the beginning? And one thing I saw was there's a dog. He's saying something to do with his dog that used to sleep in the hallway. And the answer sort of came back, sort of, no. Yeah, well, it's something in the hall. It could be a picture of a dog. Is there a picture of a dog in the hallway? And the answer came back, no. I mean, I've just put up another picture. I put up a picture in the hallway of the family or something. That's it. He's saying he doesn't like the picture in the hallway. The dog was forgotten.
Yeah.
But it actually started off talking about a dog.
Yes.
And purely because of what the audience member said, now it's about a picture in the hallway. It's become something completely different. But it looks like the medium is just sort of fumbling.
Yes.
Whereas in fact he's gauging everything on what the person's giving him.
I suppose the other thing, I imagine some people listening will be saying to themselves, oh yes, well I see that. But on the other hand, I was told a story by somebody who was told a story where the medium really did get an exact fit. And I suppose the point there is that stories only get passed on the very rare occasions when they do get an exact hit. I mean, nobody goes around telling stories of
failed. Exactly.
Failures.
Well, one of the first things you learn as a magician is that you do a trick, but half of the trick happens afterwards when that person remembers it and then wants to tell somebody else in a way that doesn't make him look stupid or look like he's been fooled. Yes. So things get exaggerated. In the same way, if you've had a great holiday and you come back and you want to tell everybody about it, So these stories we hear are always deleted and edited and twisted in all sorts of ways. I heard a tale which I thought was kind of interesting of a psychic who was at a policeman's event, and apparently it was a psychic the police had used. Although I think normally it's psychics saying they've helped the police, but either way, she was at this event, and this was being told to me by a friend of somebody who was there that the psychic spoke to at the end of the evening. And the psychic came up to this guy who was a policeman and said, "Oh, very nice to meet you," and shook his hand. And as she shook his hand, she sort of stumbled back a bit and rolled her eyes back into her head and said in a sort of far-off voice, "Oh, you better leave. Henrietta's cold. Henrietta's cold. She's waiting for you." And then she snapped out of it and said, "That was who's Henrietta?" And the guy was amazed because Henrietta was the name of his car. And when he went outside, it was snowing. So Henrietta was cold. Now, this guy tells my friend tells me with that air of, how do you explain that?
Yes.
And obviously it's a lovely story, and who knows what actually happened, but it's a great story that's come out of it. But if the woman had gone up to him and merely said, "Well, apparently you call your car Henrietta," which was the only bit of information that was of interest, was the name of the car. Somebody comes up to you and says that, you just go, "Oh, who told you that?" Obviously, presumably loads of people at the event knew that, he's a policeman, he's called his police car a name, they presumably know that.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal, the fact that she would know that or might have found it out. But because of how she presented it, through nothing other than showmanship, it made the difference between a non-event that would be passed over and a massive event for this guy that has presumably changed his belief on a lot of things.
And he goes around telling other people.
Goes around telling other people
et cetera, during the making of this programme, I've talked to a number of psychics and palm readers and people like that who've sort of done me. And what slightly disappointed me is that they got spectacularly bad results. I mean, I thought at least they'd be good at it and that they would sort of get a reasonable number of hits. And bearing in mind that what they are is like some kind of conjurer. I mean, if a stage conjurer scored as many misses as these people, he'd be booed off the stage. And yet, because they bill themselves as psychics rather than conjurers, paradoxically, they're given more latitude, they're given more license to fail than if they were taking rabbits out of a hat or sawing women in half or something.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of paradox there.
Well, this, despite the fact that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, so you'd imagine that it would be they'd have a much harder job. Whereas the reality is they have everything stacked in their favour. They tell you that it's not an exact science, you know, that some of this may not work, and all I do is I get a sense of this, and you'll help me make that fit, and if it doesn't work, then, you know, they make no promises for a start, which is a very odd thing from the outset. I don't know what they're claiming if they can't make any promises. And then they come out with various things, and you make them fit or don't fit, and if you're not really making them fit, if you're not playing the game, then you're blocking the energy, and you're sort of
yes.
It's your fault.
I did a couple of psychics who are quite famous on television and things, and one after another they gave up. They would. I mean, the first one started talking about my father, and they said, "Your father in the spirit world is very sorry that he didn't manage to say goodbye properly." So I sort of strung her along for a bit before letting her know that my father is in fact still alive at the age of 91. At that point, she just gave up. She said, "Sorry, it isn't working. The spirits aren't coming through. I just have to stop." And nothing would persuade her.
I've been making it up until this point. Because what had been coming through if it wasn't the spirits?
Quite,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if you don't play the game... You'd think if it was real, you'd at least be able to sit there quietly and they'd be able to do it without needing any sort of feedback. You'd feel you wouldn't have to play the game as the sitter, but you do have to play the game, and if you don't, it's your own...
The other thing I noticed is one of the people I went to see was a psychic who asked to have my watch, which he held in his hand to get the spirit vibrations out of the watch, etc. And then he turned up some tarot cards, and then he went through a really rather stunning series of misses. I mean, almost everything that he got wrong. He got some elderly relative beginning with the letter G, something to do with the advertising profession. Total miss. I mean, no suggestion. Then he got an elderly woman beginning with E. Well, that was a sort of hit because my grandmother's name began with E.
That's incredible.
And he, and it is the commonest letter in the alphabet.
Yeah.
And he said that she kept lots of cats, and so I was able to tell him that she absolutely hated cats. They were the one thing she abhorred. Yes, yeah. Anyway, it went on, and it was all a total set of failures. And then I was afterwards told at the end that he told somebody else that he'd done really well and that he'd got lots of hits, and I think he believed it.
Maybe for him that was a...
Yeah, I mean, it was
the best readings ever done.
But I mean, so that there's an element of self-delusion as well as just deluding the punter about this.
I think given that the whole skill seems to be not about comforting people. I think that was rubbish, although they say that. It's about getting hits. It's about hearing yes, yes, yes. So it's a strange sort of ego thing.
And getting money for it.
So, yeah. So I think it's not surprising that sort of self-delusion happens and that people after the event will say, yes, that went extremely well, and shamelessly, publicise themselves as helping the police solving this murder and that murder when they've done nothing other than presumably just rang up and say, do you want any help? No. Unless I aided police. That is self-delusion, but it's self-delusion born out of this sort of, I think, just this sort of ego need that runs behind it. It is odd.
How do people get started in a profession? Do they come out of show business, or does it run in families, or what?
A lot of the sort of stage mediums, successful career mediums. Going back to Doris Stokes, who was famous a while ago, and even quite a few around nowadays come from show business stock. And have learnt their skills undeniably from... I know the teacher of one of the very famous modern psychics who's absolutely taught them as fraudulent techniques and is upset with him for passing them off as real. I won't say who it is, but, and the other route is from magic, from being a magician and getting into the area that I'm into, which is sort of the sort of psychological mentalism, it's called. But then realising that you can step over the line and pretend to be doing it for real, and there's a lot more money in that. So
there is more money if you pretend to be something that you're not.
There's the moment you're saying it's real. The moment you say it's real, you're tapping into something enormous in people.
Yes. And there's also the paradox which we talked about before, that you're then subject to actually less...
Yes.
Scrutiny.
Yes. Less scrutiny, less need for proof.
You don't have to sort of show that you've got nothing up your sleeve, because people aren't primed to suspect that you have got something up your sleeve, and so you can have any number of magnets and wires and things,
anything you
causing
like,
bangs and bumps and things, which a stage magician wouldn't be allowed to have, because or at least he'd have to conceal them slightly better.
You have to work a lot harder when it's just tricks.
So it's a kind of win-win situation, really. You win more money, and you have to do less good tricks in order to win it.